On television, the Barney Miller group appeared to be a loving family, but off camera, their lives revealed an entirely different narrative. While filming, one actor battled a fatal illness in total secrecy. A childhood experience that would have broken most people was survived by another, and a startling tragedy that made national headlines was part of one star's personal ties. Some cast members completely vanished once the show finished, while others shocked Hollywood with their new identities. You wouldn't believe the true account of what happened to them. Lyndon Hal. There was never a straight line in Hal Lyndon's life. It constantly changed, put him to the test, and in some way continued to push him in the direction of something greater. His most well-known portrayal was that of Captain Barney Miller, yet he stood in the shadows on Broadway for nearly 10 years before taking on that composed yet astute role. Every night he toiled as an understudy, expecting that someone would call in sick and he would finally get his turn. On most evenings, nothing occurred. Nevertheless, he arrived. He continued to learn. He continued to wait. Even nevertheless, household finances remained tight, and the strain of raising 4 kids increased annually. Then 1971 came along, and everything was different. In The Rothschilds, he assumed the role of Mayor Rothschild, and delivered a performance that shattered his entire career. It seemed like everything had finally changed in his favor when he was awarded a Tony Award that year. He subsequently claimed that this time was both difficult and defining, since it made him mature as he continued to straddle the fine line between nearly succeeding and nearly failing. However, he persisted, and by 1975 a new reality was emerging all around him. Barney Miller's ascent was not simple. Not at all. The initial pilot was so unsuccessful that the show nearly ended before it even got underway. In order for Lyndon to accept the TV job, his agent had to battle for a provision that released him from Broadway. He would have lost the opportunity entirely in the absence of such clause. The pressure increased as soon as the show began taping. The timetable was harsh. Rewrites, disagreements, and scenes that were altered only before filming began caused some episodes to run into 20-hour days. The strain was felt by all, but Lyndon remained calm. He even declined a part that would have paid more than he made during his whole tenure at Barney Miller. He passed up the huge payment in favor of devotion. He refused to leave since he thought the show was important. He didn't slow down when Barney Miller finished. He switched to hosting 2 instructional TV shows, for which he received 2 daytime Emmys. He continued to perform, landing cameos on Broadway stages, Will and Grace, and The Golden Girls. He continued to be active, constantly pursuing the next goal. Every period of his life held a sort of calm resilience that kept him erect, even when the limelight dimmed for a while. He gave it his all off the sets as well. He has been the Jewish National Fund spokesperson since 1997. He remained active, publicly visible, and dedicated to the causes that influenced him. As he reflected on the 6 decades he had spent performing, fighting, learning, and rising again, he experienced both difficult and hopeful times in his life after Barney Miller. He also experienced personal losses, new endeavors, and the resurgence of old memories. Like the old days, you can start making calls as soon as he provides Sergeant Mojo Howitz with some information. Gale, Max. As Detective Stan Joe on Barney Miller, Max Gale entered the spotlight and soon gained the trust of the public. The program ran from 1975 to 1982, and for a while, that small precinct seemed to be his home. The audience adored him. He was also noticed by the industry. He received 2 consecutive nominations for the Primetime Emmy for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. And that kind of acknowledgement demonstrated to everyone that he was more than simply a sitcom star. Long after the episode was over, folks were still moved by his warm appeal, compassion, and timing. However, his personal life took an abrupt, traumatic turn that permanently altered him. While his career continued to soar, he wed Willie Beer in 1983, and the two of them built a life together for just 3 years. Then, when she died of colon cancer in 1986, everything fell apart. Their daughter India was left behind, along with Max's anguish, which did not go away easily. He thus took a temporary leave of absence from Hollywood. He prepared meals for her. He read books before bed. He attempted to reconstruct a universe that had been split in 2. And as a result of that loss, he started looking for solutions wherever he could. He was drawn down a new path by that search. He provided the narration for the 1988 documentary Hockey, When Healing Becomes a Crime. It investigated alternative medicine and questioned conventional cancer therapies. Although the movie was deemed controversial by many, Max saw it as coming from a real place. It stemmed from the need for more time for someone like Willie. It stemmed from the sense of having too few possibilities. He never quite abandoned storytelling, despite that change in emphasis. He had already directed a number of Barney Miller episodes, demonstrating his ability to see a situation from every perspective. This skill accompanied him throughout the following years. Max discovered a whole other path later in life, when many performers slow down. He joined General Hospital in 2018 as Mike Corbin, and for some reason the part was a natural fit for him. He gave the character compassion, and the Alzheimer's plot heartbreaking honesty. People sensed it. The Academy sensed it. In 2019 and 2021, he took home the Daytime Emmy for Best Supporting Actor. It's difficult enough to win once. It is rare for somebody to win twice at that age. In 2020, his character on the show died. However, Max remained. He reappeared as a subdued figure, a ghost leading his son on film through heartache and bewilderment. Because those sequences had a sense of peace and completion, fans adored them. They were also appreciated by critics, who said that his portrayal gave scenes that may have seemed straightforward more substance. He continued to move even after the end of that chapter. He arrived at Chicago Med. He entered Magnum Pi, and continued to demonstrate his ability to change tones and styles, while maintaining the same warmth that had won him admirers decades before. However, I began to receive other parts, and Barney Miller was one of them. Thus, I completed the pilot, Ron Glass. Ron Glass exuded a serene appeal that effortlessly drew others to him. When he took on the character of Detective Ron Harris on Barney Miller, people initially sensed it. The program debuted in 1975 and continued to air on television until 1982. And he was unforgettable over those years, thanks to his blend of calm intelligence and easy confidence. The program itself won 2 Emmys and 2 Golden Globes. He was also nominated for an Emmy in 1982 for supporting acting. It was the sort of occasion that ought to have made him who he was. However, once the cameras stopped filming, he accomplished something that most people were unaware of. Therefore, his life continued to open up new avenues. He dedicated his time to assisting children that had very little opportunity. He was appointed Al Wooten Jr.'s chairman, Los Angeles' Heritage Center. Following the death of a young man in a gang initiation drive-by, the center was established. Ron quietly took over and remained there for many years. He oversaw initiatives, gathered support, and ensured that children who felt stuck saw a way out of their predicament. He felt even greater pressure and put in more effort after the Rodney King judgment rocked the city in the 1990s. Many of the children he assisted went on to attend college. Some even claimed that without him, they would not have survived. He nevertheless led a quiet and intimate life. He was raised Catholic, but over time, Buddhism offered him a new type of serenity. He joined Sukagaka International because he supported its emphasis on culture and education, as well as the notion that one individual can bring about peace. He didn't get married. He never made an effort to demonstrate his abilities to others. He simply led a calm life that made sense to him. Following the conclusion of Barney Miller, he continued to play a variety of roles while being constant and present. He served as Felix Anger's replacement for The Odd Couple's 1982 reboot. He later appeared in Firefly as Shepherd Book. When he made a comeback in Serenity in 2005, fans adored him even more. In between all of that, he made appearances on CSI, Murder, She Wrote, and Friends. He seemed to have been a part of that world from the beginning, each time he appeared on screen. He continued to work. He continued to assist. And without making much of it, he continued to provide folks something warm. People started to learn how much he had done behind the scenes, until he passed away on November 25, 2016. They witnessed his kind life and the silent strength of a man who lived to uplift others. Staying loyal to their characters, and making sure that everything that was written was fully explored. Abe Vigoda, on the other hand, surprised people all his life. He was well known worldwide as Silasio from The Godfather, and as investigator, Phil Fish from Barney Miller. The most peculiar aspect of his career, however, had nothing to do with acting. It was that even though he was fully alive, people continued to believe he had passed away. It began in 1982 while he was in Canada, acting in a theater production. He was referred to as the late Abe Vigod in an article published in the magazine People. It was a minor error, but once it happened, it became a national joke that no one wanted to stop telling. Soon, he was being teased about it by TV hosts. The actors cooperated. To make light of the misconception, he once posed for a picture inside a coffin, and even leaned into it with a weary expression. He later reminded Hollywood that he was still alive and active by using the same image in an advertisement. And every time he came to see David Letterman late at night, he would just remark he was alive as he walked out and looked at the crowd. It made people chuckle, but something more serious developed behind the joke. In fact, a few casting directors took the rumor seriously. He was more offended than he ever acknowledged when they passed him over for roles due to a magazine headline. Another type of conflict arose behind the scenes during his time on Barney Miller. A simmering strain became audible when he left the program to feature in his own spin-off, Fish. Pay and billing disputes erupted into public discourse. When he failed to attend rehearsals, producers even filed a lawsuit against him, and the entire incident made headlines in trade publications for the entertainment industry. He was gifted, intelligent, and resilient enough to stand up for what he thought was rightfully his. However, the strain of those conflicts weighed heavily on him for years. In an attempt to maintain stability, he continued to return to Barney Miller for guest performances. However, the same disagreements persisted, so he left once more. He wasn't at all like Detective Fish off camera. Fish whined at everything and dragged his feet. Abe Vogode was a handball player and jogger who frequently ran 5 miles before work because he enjoyed being active. Those familiar with him grinned at the contrast. On TV, he appeared worn out, yet in real life, he could outpace the majority of the cast. The stories had been going about for so long that it was almost unbelievable when he finally died in January 2016 at the age of 94. A few weeks before turning 95, he passed away quietly in his sleep at his daughter's house. And according to friends, he appeared healthy till the last end. Detective Fish is a part of this new series. He is a man with worn-out feet. Sue Jack. Despite initially appearing impossible, Jack Sue's life progressed through these situations. He was one of over 120,000 Japanese Americans who were evicted from their houses after Executive Order 9066 in 1942 and transferred to the Topaz War Relocation Center in Utah. During World War II, people there felt as though they were forgotten. There was fear in every family, but he started speaking in the midst of that quiet. He sang. He made a joke. He felt that the night could feel a little lighter if he could make even one person laugh. So he tried to make them laugh. He quickly became well known as the clown who lifted people's spirits, despite the fact that his own family had to deal with discrimination, bereavement, and the burden of a nation that viewed them as foreigners. He returned to the world with hope after the war. However, he found it difficult to open the globe. He worked at establishments, including Cleveland's Continental Grove and Chin's Golden Dragon restaurant in the early 1950s. He performed for adoring audiences night after night. However, when radio stations discovered his past, everything changed. Without hesitation, they removed him from the air. Many non-white entertainers of that era were destroyed by this kind of covert discrimination. He was aware that he had to decide whether to give up or look for another route in. As a result, he became Jack Sue instead of Goro Suzuki. Understanding how Americans confused Asian identities, he decided to pass for Chinese, since he needed every opportunity. He did not make this decision hastily. It was a survival tactic during a period when he had few options. Gradually, the work started to yield results. He was cast in the Broadway production of Flower Drum Song, and went on to star in the movie. After that, more doors opened. In the end, he played investigator Nick Yamana on Barney Miller, a unique character. Yamana was not like other people. He wasn't a sidekick. He was a funny, flawed, and complex American police officer. Jack ensured that. He declined parts that portrayed Asian Americans as inferior or stupid. He refused to accept anything insulting from anyone, even if it meant losing his job. He felt that actors from all walks of life ought to be allowed to play any role, and each time he set foot on a set, he lived out that belief. Jack Sue was designed to resemble Bing Crosby in Chinese culture. Jack was a vocalist. He performed in the film Flower Drum Song. Gregory James. From Wall Street to Hollywood, James Gregory's path was never a straight line. He worked as a stockbroker, and it began in a noisy, numbers-filled room that he detested every minute of. He just informed his supervisor how he truly felt about his job one day, and left. There was just a sense that life had to be more than this. No strategy, no safety net. Everything was uncertain immediately following that audacious departure. Whatever work he could find, he took. Small occupations that earned barely enough to keep him going included counter jobs, clerk jobs, and other jobs. However, he continued to pursue the thing that drew him ahead each night. Small stock theater roles at first, followed by somewhat larger ones. Broadway eventually began calling him in. Even though he wasn't well known yet, he was making steady, incremental progress. Then something changed. He was cast in The Lawless Years in 1959 as NYPD Detective Barney Ritzky. For him, the 1959-1961 run of the show was a game changer. He caught the attention of producer Danny Arnold, who remembered his name. Arnold recalled Gregory's demeanor when he wanted someone to portray Deputy Inspector Frank Luger on Barney Miller years later. The presence, the voice, the obstinate charm. According to him, Gregory made him think of the actual Barney Ruditsky, the former New York Rackets cop from the days of Prohibition. Thus he assigned him the part. And something clicked when Gregory took Luger's place. The character was boisterous, sentimental, occasionally irritating, occasionally endearing, and consistently memorable. Gregory became a household name in households all around the nation thanks to Luger's 7 years on the show. He added a blend of warmth and fire to every scene, which is why people adored him. However, his narrative continued to progress. He never slowed down even after he became known on television. He continued to take up parts, eventually making appearances in over 100 television and film productions. He portrayed law enforcement officers, senators, soldiers, and even villains. He had a performance in The Manchurian Candidate in 1962 that is still remembered today, making it one of his most famous roles. He simply shrugged when someone asked if he was concerned about being typecast. He declared that he would accept any role, no matter how big or tiny, comedy or drama, that piqued his curiosity. Then there was yet another turn of events. He oversaw his own brief series, Detective School, in the late 1970s. It was a nice idea, but it didn't survive long. Gregory portrayed an instructor instructing common folks on how to become private observers, salespeople, housewives, and anybody else who was willing to try. Although it was a light show, it demonstrated how at ease he was fusing humor and power. He made the decision to quit performing in 1983. His life had already spanned decades of American cinema and television. He demonstrated that it is possible to reinvent oneself more than once. You can get off Wall Street, fumble with odd jobs, compete for roles, seize opportunities, and yet have a name people remember. Sierra Gregory. Gregory Sierra's career progressed with an enthusiasm that never ceased to astound people. When he entered the world of Sanford and Son in 1972 as Julio Fuentes, everything began to change. He repeatedly portrayed the Puerto Rican neighbor who was subjected to Fred Sanford's jests. However, he did it with a spark that sustained the persona. He made Julio respectable. He made him laugh. People took notice when he made him feel authentic. Then, when he joined Barney Miller as Detective Sergeant Chano Amanal in 1975, everything changed once more. He played the part with pride and a fire that gave each scene a sharp, vibrant sense. Despite only appearing for 2 seasons, he made an impression that persisted throughout the series. His timing, his ferocity, and his gentleness when it mattered were all topics of discussion among writers. He turned into one of those actors who effortlessly stole scenes. He continued with sitcoms as well. He also slid into a series of movies, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, 1970, The Towering Inferno 1974, and Papon 1973. They each revealed a different aspect of him. He had a sense of humor. He might put himself in risk. He might portray a man who has been broken by the world, or one who is strong as a result. He frequently selected parts that gave him the opportunity to proudly display his Puerto Rican ancestry, something that was uncommon in Hollywood at the time. Others were given opportunities by those decisions. They helped pave the way for Latino actors who followed him, first quietly and then gradually and consistently. His life carried a burden that many people were unaware of when he was not in the public eye. He had 3 marriages. Susan Pollack in 1976, after Eileen Dialita from 1969 to 1972. In 1978, she took her own life, and he was deeply wounded by that loss. Later, he found stability with Helen Tabor, his 3rd wife. However, the shadows persisted. He had experienced adversity as a child. He was raised by an aunt in a rough Irish area of New York. After his parents abandoned him when he was a small child, he gravitated toward gang life as a youth. Then one day, he and a friend entered an acting class. He had no intention of performing, but something ignited inside him when he gave it a try. It was observed by the teachers. They immediately took him in. He soon began touring with the National Shakespeare Company, taking on roles that nobody had anticipated. Years later, he battled liver and stomach cancer once more. Before dying on January 4, 2021, at the age of 83, he battled the sickness for years. As he requested, his wife received his ashes. His narrative often shifted from suffering to opportunity. Ron Carey followed an unexpected course of his own. He is primarily remembered as Barney Miller's officer Carl Levitt. However, he wasn't even portraying a police officer when he made his debut in 1976. He appeared as the Mole, a crook. He investigated banks. He emerged from the floors. Even the detectives were covered in dirt from his cough. People adored it. Thus, the authors recreated him as Levitt, the diminutive and ambitious patrolman who was constantly vying for a promotion, rather than as the Mole. Even though he was just 5, the jokes continued. However, his portrayal of Levitt was so endearing that the character seemed like the small guy that everyone wanted to support. And he eventually received that promotion around the end of the series. The entire team was irritated when he entered wearing loud sport jackets, but the supporters enjoyed every moment of it. However, once the show ended in 1982, he encountered the same kind of difficulties in his career as Levitt did in The Precinct. In 1984, he had a minor part in Johnny Dangerously. Next was the sitcom Johnny Garage, which was canceled after just a few episodes. But he continued to labor. In 1989, he played the part of a priest in Have Faith. He appeared as a guest on Lucky Luke and Midnight Caller. And he returned to stand-up whenever the work slowed. He made jokes about being the shortest person in the room, about guilt, and about his Italian-American family. He loved performing, so he continued. His anchor was that it was quieter in his later years. He struggled with health issues until passing away in 2007 at the age of 71 following a stroke. Despite being married for 38 years, he had never had children. Food for Thought, a 1999 short film, was his final motion picture. Landisberg, Steve. As the cool-headed and astute voice of Detective Arthur Dietrich on Barney Miller, Steve Landisberg into people's living rooms. He wasn't at all like the character he portrayed off-screen, though. The character effortlessly threw out knowledge about economics and science, and spoke like a scholar. In a 1979 Washington Post profile, however, Landisberg acknowledged that he did not read a lot of that material. He claimed he made an effort to portray Dietrich as a humorous and intelligent police officer rather than a professor in uniform. The twist then appears. His true expertise was working in hotels. Prior to his career in comedy, television, and celebrity, he worked as an assistant credit manager at various hotels, monitoring credit cards, identifying con artists, and apprehending visitors who attempted to leave without paying. He liked to say it was a combination of manager, police, and clerk. Long before he played a cop on TV, that real job became his first police training. Strangely, he also transferred a sense of human behavior into his scenarios, from all those nights spent watching people lie and worry. His journey to Barney Miller was anything but conventional. In New York, he began his career as a stand-up comedian, performing impressions and developing his act one venue at a time. He soon started making appearances on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, where he quickly gained popularity. His voice, timing, and slow-burn delivery made people giggle. However, he will not disclose his age. He was afraid that casting directors would reject him if they found out he was middle-aged and still not well-known. Thus, he consistently sidestepped the topic. He gave the impression that he was younger than he actually was for years. When he initially appeared on The Barney Miller, set in 1975, fans didn't realize he was already in his late 30s. The shadow of Detective Dietrich followed him everywhere, despite the fact that he went on to receive numerous Emmy nominations, continued to work on movies like Wild Hogs in 2007, and Forget Sarah Marshall in 2008. It was difficult for audiences to perceive him as anything else, because they adored him so much in that one part. He led a very secluded life away from the limelight. He didn't discuss his health much. He concealed nearly everything when cancer became an issue. It wasn't until December 20, 2010, when it was announced that he had passed away at the age of 65, that even his closest admirers realized something was off. People were taken aback. Then the tributes came pouring in. There were tales of how much he had influenced new actors, comedy writers, and the tone of the series he helped establish. And it became evident how subtly he had managed a protracted sickness while continuing to perform, appear, and make people laugh.